So it's exciting to think about doing this again. Remind us of the importance of this particular conference. It's different from Mackinac, and I've always enjoyed that difference.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. And that is exactly why we created the Detroit Policy Conference, to be very different than the Mackinac Conference. The Mackinac Conference, which is obviously a tremendous statewide asset that the Chamber and myself are happy to be stewards of, but it really is a statewide and now actually kind of becoming a national platform. That left a real void, which is how and when do we talk about issues specifically to the Detroit region and the city of Detroit? And we think one of the biggest issues that's facing all of us right now is what is the trajectory of our downtown? And that is going to be the theme of this year's conference. And, you know, as always, we're going to be focused on Detroit issues at the Detroit Policy Conference.
And I think that's excellent, Sandy. But before we go any further, give us the logistical details of the conference.
Yeah, it's Tuesday, the 10th of January. It starts at 9 o'clock in the morning. It'll be held at Motor City Casino. The public is welcome. You can register on the Chamber website, which is detroitchamber.com, and you can register there.
And so Detroit's going to be the focus. Downtown Detroit's going to be the focus, which, you know, I'm very encouraged to see, because we're sitting downtown right now, as you are, and we look out this window and we're not seeing what we saw 3 years ago. You know, the streets are, you know, fairly empty. You can't say that downtown has come back. As you look at where we are, you know, what's your assessment? How do we compare today to 3 years ago, and what needs to happen over the next 2 to 5 years?
Well, I certainly don't have all the answers in terms of what needs to happen over the next 3 to 5 years. That's one of the reasons why we're pulling together this event, to get thought leaders to give us ideas as what to do, because Nolan, the ethos of your question is exactly right, which is downtown Detroit hasn't come back to what it was prior to the pandemic. And that's an issue. And that's not an issue just for downtown. You know, downtown Detroit is core, not just to the city of Detroit, but the entire Southeast Michigan region. The resurgence of this entire region that started over a decade ago was driven in no small part to the resurgence of downtown. And if downtown doesn't recover, that could potentially mean problems for the rest of our region. It could mean problems for our businesses attracting young professional talent, and they may not even be located in downtown Detroit. This is going to impact businesses based in Troy or Ann Arbor or Warren. This is going to have a pretty significant impact. So we need to understand, one, where we are. And right now, Detroit is last of all the big cities in the nation for back to the office in its downtown core. This is based on cell phone data. And actually, you know, in your paper ran a couple stories based off of this data. So we do have an issue. We need to acknowledge that. And the second thing we need to acknowledge is that until people come back, you know, day businesses, you know, retail, lunch places are going to continue to struggle. Fortunately, on the good side, our evening activities are doing pretty well. Getting a restaurant reservation in downtown Detroit, just about any day of the week, really difficult.
Right.
So you know, I don't have the answers either, obviously, or I'd be mayor or king or something or whatever you might imagine. But it does seem to me that we kind of have to think differently about downtown during the day than we had been before. That it's been long enough now that if we were going to see people repopulate all this office space that we built out over the last decade in the same way, that it would be there, or at least there'd be momentum toward that. I don't have a lot of confidence that's actually coming. And so the pressure, I think, is even more on us to come up with, okay, well, what else do we do?
Yeah, and I think this is very much an and conversation, Stephen. So one, what are other cities doing, or what is it about other cities' culture that has allowed or enabled more people to be back downtown in their offices. Secondly, I do think that, as the economy evolves, I think we're all expecting at least some sort of economic slowdown, maybe not necessarily a recession, but we're not going to necessarily run at the fever pitch that we have been running these last couple of years. Will that change the workers' dynamic? And then presumably, as the dynamics of the workforce changes or the economy changes, we'll probably see a reduction in concerns about COVID as well too, which still run pretty high, especially in the city of Detroit, not so much in the suburbs, but certainly we're seeing it in the city. So I haven't given up on the fact that more people might be coming back downtown. But to your point, Stephen, we do have to think very differently about how we utilize space. One of the issues is that Detroit still continues to lag in hotel spaces. We don't have enough hotel space to suit what we have the opportunity for.
The Detroit News had a piece in the paper this week about the sort of boomlet in hotels, and there's about 20% more rooms will go from about 5,000 to 6,000. What does a city like Detroit need in terms of hotel room? What's the magic number?
Yeah, well, I don't have the answer to that question, but at the conference, we have Richard Florida, the national renowned expert on urbanism coming, but we also have local people like Eric Larson and Claude Molinari. I mean, they are knee deep in these issues. And, I'm not going to try to answer that question. So that's why Claude and Eric are going to be there.
So Sandy, I mean, we've done this before. I mean, we talked for years about downtown Detroit, what it's going to take to revive it. And then we hit a pace where it was going tremendously well. And the energy and excitement about downtown was there. We had national investors coming in here, snatching up property, looking for opportunities. How much of that do you still see?
So that oddly, and I say oddly because I'm surprised happily by it, is still continuing. When you look at the investment in large scale projects, it is still coming. Now, what we have seen is some of the smaller developments, be kind of on the fringes of downtown or on the fringes of Corktown. Some of those projects indeed have fallen through since COVID, but the large scale projects are still going. When you look at things like the Hudson site or the International Bridge Crossing or some of these other major redevelopments that are taking place, they're still going full bore, and they really haven't lost a step. I mean, if you talk to the people at Michigan Central Station and what they are doing, they're actually more optimistic now about what they're building and who's interested in than they were prior to the pandemic.